Hey folks, David Stewart here. Have you heard this latest rumor? Another Hollywood rumor. There's going to be a black Helen of Troy. I actually don't know if this is going to be true. Where does this rumor come from? Well, there's been a big list of the cast for Christopher Nolan's upcoming adaptation of the epic poem The Odyssey. It includes several cast members that don't have a role listed. One of those is Lupita Nyong'o. She's African. And then there's also Ellen Page playing some sort of trouser role. So the internet has decided that Lupita is going to be Helen of Troy. So you're going to have a black Helen of Troy. They also decided Ellen Page is going to be Achilles, which would just be very funny. Is this a brown M&M test? Is this letting you know that they're not taking this very seriously? I think so, but I think there might be a reason why they're doing this that I haven't seen too many people talk about, which is they're required to do this in order to get Oscar nominations. This is a weird thing that has come up over the last couple of years, but if your movie doesn't meet certain diversity quotas, you can't get Oscar nominations, you can't win the Oscar. So maybe Christopher Nolan was wanting to make like a big high concept movie like Gladiator or Lord of the Rings, something that's going to be really popular, big blockbuster, and kind of get like the Academy and the audience back together on the same page. I haven't seen very much with this movie, by the way, for me to have confidence that it's going to be a good movie. In fact, I have the opposite, which is a real lack of confidence that it's going to be good. And this is part of it. I think it is a bit of a brown M&M test. If they were really serious about it, then they would probably approach these things differently. Because one of the things you have to think about with the Odyssey is that it's not fantasy. The big rebuttal to this objection, besides just calling people racist, is that this is fantasy. So, like, why can't you have Helen of Troy be black? Why can't any random character be African or some other race? I'm looking at the cast. I'm not seeing any Asians, by the way. Only Africans and Europeans. But I might be missing. Oh, and one Indian. There's an Indian in there, too. Okay. So I was just looking at the cast on the other screen. Why can't you have that? This is just the BMW meme, which is like, you can accept giants and cyclopses and dragons and Hydra or whatever. Why can't you have this race-swapped character? Well, fantasy does not excuse impossibility. I went over this like 10 years ago. Even if you're doing fantasy, which this is not, I'll get to that in a second. Even if you're doing fantasy, any fantasy story comes with a set of expectations for the audience. The audience expects certain things to be possible or impossible based on the rule set that you kind of deliver to them in the exposition. And if you just start doing random things that don't fit that breaks the immersion. They get disconnected from the story. It's just bad storytelling technique, right? So if anything can happen for any reason, you're not in fantasy anymore. You're in Bizarro. Bizarro literature is cool in its own way, but it's not consistent. It has a different vibe, different feel, different direction than trying to write fantasy. That being said, the Odyssey is not fantasy. The Odyssey is that line between legend and myth. It treads on both sides of that. It's myth because the gods are involved, and it's legend because there's a real people that are involved in a real conflict in a real place. We've actually excavated Troy. So Troy was a real place, and Greece is a real place, and the Greeks are real people. So Helen of Troy, being from Greece, would be European and not sub-Saharan African. And the parallel that you can look at would be like the Exodus story. I don't know of any adaptations of Exodus that have a black Moses, and that's because Moses was Semitic. The Hebrews were a Semitic people. They weren't sub-Saharan Africans. And the Egyptians weren't sub-Saharan Africans. They were distinct and specific ethnic groups. And you're telling not just a story, right? It's not just a myth where, like, the gods like sneeze out the ocean, or, the gods are chopping their heads open and out pop goddesses. It's not purely myth. The gods are involved, right? Like in the Exodus story, God is doing all these miracles. He parts the Red Sea. He's talking to Moses, but then there's also the Egyptian priests who are calling on their gods to perform similar miracles. So there's divinity that's involved in it, but it's a story about a real people. And that story is intimately bound up in the history of those people. It tells their history, it tells their story, it tells them where they came from. So it straddles that line between legend and myth. It's definitely about real people. And the Odyssey is the same. You have to think for the people that were telling these stories to each other even before Homer wrote them down, that they were telling a history. They believed it to be history. The gods were involved, yes, but it was real groups of people from Greece going to a real place in Asia Minor, doing a real war, having a real conflict, and that establishing lots of things about their history. So because it is this higher level, it's not fantasy and it's not even history. It's a different mode of story. It deserves a little more weight. The Iliad and the Odyssey are the most important pieces of literature that we have in Europe besides the Bible, like from ancient times. They are so influential, so important. And it's not just that they're influential on literature, it's that they have that important place in the history of the Greek people. So they deserve to be treated with a higher level of reverence, a higher level of respect, and a strong desire to fulfill the realities of what are there, which is telling this history and this myth and these myths about the Greek people. So to me, having weird casting decisions is artistically signaling that you aren't taking that seriously, right? It is what we've talked about before, that brown M&M test, where because you're not removing the brown M&Ms as it says to, you're not taking the contract seriously. And the other things that I've seen also lead me to believe that the costumes look cheap. It just doesn't look like it's going to be a very good adaptation of the Odyssey. I think people are still waiting for like a really great kind of movie adaptation of the Odyssey, and I just don't see this being it. I'm really sorry. But that's what it is. I think the big focus is you have to do it for Oscar nominations, and all the other stuff that we're talking about is kind of secondary to that. Yes, we should take it seriously. The people who are Greek should be Greek, or at least European, at least somewhat close in terms of race. And you can get into what did the ancient Greeks look like? Did they look a little bit different than modern Greeks or things like that? But if you wanted to be really like authentic, then you would just have all Greek actors, right? That would be an interesting way to do it. It's like everybody's Mediterranean. It's all Mediterranean actors. And then it would be like the most accurate way that you could do it. And I think you could probably argue that is probably the best way to do it. And that would be a cool argument. But I think it's definitely a bridge too far to be, doing random diversity characters, even if you're going to meet the quota. But that's what I expect is driving a large part of it. And we'll see. And we'll see who is going to be cast as what, whether it will be like comically bad or if it'll just be deeply immersion breaking, or, like Zendaya in anything, just a dead fish on the screen that just can't act, like a board with a face painted on it. I just think she's a terrible actress. But anyway, you leave me your thoughts down below. I would love to read them and know what you think about this rumor. I'll check you all next time. Have a great day.